Non so esprimermi bene in italiano e per quello preferirei di parlare in inglese. 3 prisoners were sentenced to death. One of them French, one of them German, one of them Italian. What is your last wish? They ask the French guy. He says, a bottle of exquisite French wine. What is your last wish? They ask the German guy. He says, I want to give a speech. What is your last wish? They ask the Italian guy. He says, I want to get shot before the German starts his speech. Unfortunately for you guys, it is too late now, because I'm already in the middle of my little speech about the grand theme of our age, the rise of artificial intelligence, which is going to transform every aspect of our civilization. What you see behind me is a drawing that I made more than 30 years ago. It's a robot that pulls itself out of the swamp, that bootstraps itself, and it was for the cover of my diploma thesis, which was very ambitious. There, I wanted to solve the grand problem of AI, of artificial intelligence. Build a machine that learns, but not only learns something here and learns something there, but also learns to improve the way it learns, and also improves the way it learns, and so on, without any limits, recursive self-improvement without any limits except for the limits of logics and physics. And the idea was to build a machine that learns to solve all the problems that I cannot solve myself, such that I can retire. And I'm still working on the same old thing, and I'm still saying pretty much the same old things that I said back then, and the only difference is that more people are listening. Because on the way to that goal, we have developed a couple of methods which are now on every smartphone, doing the AI on 3 billion smartphones. What you see here are the logos of the 5 most valuable companies of the year 2017. Apple, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook. And already back then, they emphasized that AI is central to what they are doing, central. And already back then, they were heavily using the deep learning neural networks, the artificial neural networks that we have developed in my little labs in Munich and in Switzerland, in the Istituto dalle Molle, which was founded in Switzerland by a rich Italian guy, Dalle Molle, who found that it is easier to create a foundation like that in Switzerland rather than in his home country. In particular, something that is called the long short-term memory. Has anybody here ever heard anything about the long short-term memory? Hands up. Maybe 2 or 3 guys. Has anybody never heard anything about the long short-term memory? Hands up. I see we have a third group in this room who didn't understand the question. The long short-term memory is a neural network, a little bit inspired by the human brain. In your brains, you've got 100 billion little processors called neurons. And each of them is connected to, on average, 10,000 other neurons, which means you have 1 billion million connections in your brains. And some of these neurons are input neurons, and information is coming in through the cameras and through the microphones. And hundreds of millions of pixels are coming in every few milliseconds. And some of the neurons are output neurons, and they control your finger muscles and speech muscles. And each of these connections has a strength. And this strength says, how much does this neuron over here influence this neuron over there at the next time step? And in the beginning, all these connections are random. They are random. And the network knows nothing. It is dumb, like a baby, and it knows nothing. But then, through a learning algorithm, some of these connections get stronger, and some of them get weaker. And over time, the whole network learns to solve all kinds of interesting problems, such as recognizing speech or driving cars. Just learning like a baby. And you may never have heard of the LSTM, the long short-term memory, but you all have it in your pockets because it's on every smartphone. And whenever you are doing the speech recognition for Google, whenever you say, okay, Google, what is the shortest way to the station? Then Google is using a long short-term memory created here in Europe, not invented in California, not invented in China, but here in Europe. And it's using that to recognize your speech. And the same LSTM is used for many other things. Here is a picture of the basic LSTM cell. I have no time to explain how that really works in detail, but I can at least mention the brilliant students in my lab which made that possible. First of all, Sepp Hochreiter, my first student ever in the early 1990s, but then Felix Geers, Alex Graves, and several other guys. How is it used today? Today, a large fraction of the computational power of this planet is used for LSTM. For example, in all these Google data centers, almost 30% of the calculation power for inference is used for LSTM because it's running on 2 billion Android phones for the speech recognition. But it's not only doing the speech recognition, but it's also doing the translation in Google Translate. Whenever you use Google Translate, you translate from one language to another. It's an LSTM, or actually a combination of two LSTMs that has learned to translate. And so, how does that work? Well, letter by letter and word by word, the letters, the sentences are streaming into this LSTM, and along these recurrent feedback connections, memories of older inputs are still circling around, and in the beginning, all the connections are random. Nonsense is coming out, nonsense is coming out. But there's a difference between the nonsense that is coming out and the French translation that should have come out. And this difference is called the error. And then there's a way of minimizing the error by changing all these connection strengths. And that's how the thing learns to recognize language. And it knows many languages that I don't know. So we can train these things to learn to do stuff that we cannot do ourselves. And the same LSTM is now doing, also for Facebook, since 2017, 4 billion translations a day. 4 billion a day, that's 50,000 a second. Was invented here in Europe, not in America, not in China. And the best thing is, whenever you click at this little Facebook translation button to translate a little message from your Spanish friend, 50,000 times a second people are doing that. Whenever you click there, we are getting 1 cent. Now you think that's a lot of money, but no, it's still less than 100,000 cents per second. I'm just kidding. LSTM is free for all. It was financed by European taxpayers, and everybody can use it for doing all kinds of things. Google is using it, Samsung is using it, everybody is using it, and it's free for all. You can download it today and use it to predict the stock market or whatever you want to do. Does anybody have here, does anybody have an Amazon Alexa at home? Amazon Alexa. So you know you can ask it a question and it answers back. It answers back in a female voice. This voice is not a recording. It's an LSTM, a long short-term memory from the pre-Alpine countries, which has learned to sound like a woman. All the iPhones, 1 billion iPhones, have an LSTM on there to do the quick type and different things, various other things. When we started with this research, very few people were interested. And I remember in the beginning, around 1991, I gave a talk at a conference, a little bit like here, except that there was only one person in the audience. There was just a single person in the audience, a young lady. I said, young lady, it's very embarrassing, but apparently today I'm going to give this talk just to you. And she said, okay, but please hurry, I am the next speaker. Since then, we have greatly profited from the fact that every 5 years, computers are getting 10 times cheaper. That's an old trend that has held since 1941, when this guy behind me built the first working program-controlled computer, and he could do roughly 1 elementary operation per second, 1. And then 10 years later, you could do 100 times as many for the same price. And 30 years later, you could do 1 million operations for the same price. And today, we can do 1 million billion operations per second for the same price. And soon, for the first time, we will have little computational devices, and they will be able to compute as much as a human brain. We don't have those yet, but soon we will have those. And if the trend doesn't break, and there's no reason why it should break soon, because the physical limits are very far out. If the trend doesn't break, then 50 years later, we will have a little computational device which can compute as much as all 10 billion brains combined, as much as all of humankind together. And there will not only be one little device like that, there will be millions and billions and trillions. And almost all computational power, which currently still is in human brains, will be in computational devices. Everything is going to change. All of this started in Europe a long time ago. The basic inventions in AI and deep learning came from Europe. The World Wide Web came from Europe. The computer itself came from Europe. However, the most profitable companies in these fields, they are on the Pacific Rim in West Coast America, East Coast Asia. Amazon, Alibaba, Facebook, Tencent, both in the same league on the stock market. But it started all here, and it started actually in the Ukraine in '65. This was Ivaknenko, the man who had the first deep neural networks with many layers, and they learned. And then there was a Finnish guy in a neighbor state of the Soviet Union. Back then, the Ukraine was not called the Ukraine, was called the Soviet Union, and he invented this method which is called backpropagation, 1970, which is now on every smartphone and which is doing the training of these connections, making some stronger and making some weaker. By 2009, for the first time, these computers were fast enough such that my team could win competitions using a long short-term memory and LSTM to recognize handwriting in languages that we don't know. We don't know Arab. I don't know how to speak Arab or to recognize Arab handwriting. But we can train our networks to do that just from lots of training examples. By 2011, our computers were fast enough and cheap enough such that for the first time we could win computer vision contests with superhuman performance. Already in 2011, when computers were still 60 times more expensive than today. So today we can do 60 times as much for the same price. And every 10 years we are gaining a factor of 100. And every 30 years we are gaining a factor of 1 million. All of that, recognizing traffic signs like what you see here, is important for self-driving cars. That's another European invention. Some people think maybe Google invented self-driving cars, but no, of course not. This was invented in Bavaria in the 1980s. Dickmanns was the guy who had the first self-driving cars in traffic, and by 1994 he had them on the Autobahn, on the highway, and they were going up to 180 kilometers an hour, 3 times faster than the Google cars today. So back then, however, pattern recognition did not work as well as it does today, because pattern recognition is much harder than chess. Playing chess is rather easy compared to pattern recognition, because in the year 1997, the best chess player already was a computer, not a human any longer. But back then, no computer could remotely keep up with little kids when it came to recognizing faces, glasses, cars, pedestrians, and all this stuff. So we have greatly profited from this acceleration of computational power, and only recently we were able to win pattern recognitions, competitions. The same thing that you can use to recognize traffic sign is going to transform all of healthcare. What you see here is from a competition that we won in 2012, when computers were about 50 times more expensive than today. What you see is a slice through the female breast. The female breast can have dangerous cells in it. So a trained histologist usually looks at these images and says, this is a cell in pre-cancer stage, and this is harmless, and this is dangerous, and this is harmless. And we can train our dumb, deep artificial neural networks to learn to recognize these pathologies as well as a doctor. And we were able to outperform all the other companies, Siemens and many other companies who were participating in this competition, through deep neural networks that learn to do stuff that we cannot do ourselves. And today, we can already do 50 times as much for the same price. And soon, all of medical diagnosis is going to be superhuman. And almost all of AI research is really about making human lives better and longer and healthier. I would like to point out that that at the moment, most of the profits are in marketing. Marketing is maybe 1 or 2% of the world economy. Facebook and Tencent and Alibaba and Amazon, they are using LSTM and other networks like that to predict which ad do you want to see next. Given all the newspaper articles that you read, which newspaper article would you like to read next, such that you stay longer on the platform and the likelihood increases that you will click an ad. And this is enough to make these companies pretty much the most valuable companies in the world. But it is only 1 or 2% of the world economy. A much larger part of the economy is going to be affected by the next wave of AI, which will be about intelligent robots. That's something from 10 years ago, even more than that, when for the first time we were able to use LSTM for robots. This has a huge future, and it's going to be really relevant for all of Europe, especially Central Europe, including Northern Italy, Southern Germany, Switzerland, all these places where the machines and the robots are made. I always say there is no part of the world that is more predestined to become central for the next wave of AI, which is about intelligent machines. Currently, what you have on your smartphone is passive pattern recognition. Yes, it can do speech recognition, it can do translation of stuff, but it doesn't have fingers. It's not like a robot, like a machine. And this is going to change completely. All the machines are going to get intelligent. They are going to have cameras. They already have cameras. They have different other sensors, and they translate. They have to learn, like babies, to translate these sensor inputs into actions for controlling processes, factories, cars, all kinds of machines. And where is the place where most of the machines are made? It's still Europe. It's not America. It's not Japan and Korea, although these are the main competitors. And it's more and more China. But at the moment, it's still here where many world market leaders are building the best machines, and where lots of knowledge and expertise exists in this field of AI, which was invented here. So what you have to do in Europe in general, and in Italy in particular, is probably learn something from China and America, who used a lot of industrial policy to grow their own companies. Amazon and Tesla, they had billions of subsidies from the American taxpayer. Chinese companies had billions of subsidies from Chinese taxpayers, and you had lots of protection. China said, no, we cannot have Facebook in the country, because then every American company would have access to the living rooms of all the Chinese people, some of them inhabited by decision makers. We cannot have that. We have our own champions. We have Tencent, which is now as big as Facebook on the stock market. And so they had industrial policy, and it was good for them. While Europe didn't have any industrial policy. Although the World Wide Web was invented here, the others on the Pacific Rim made the money on it. So maybe you can learn something from China and from America. Recently, I was in the Reichstag in Berlin, and I said, you guys, you have to keep up with China. You have to do what Beijing is doing. Beijing is investing $2 billion for an AI park, an AI campus. I said, you have to do the same thing in Germany, in some famous city, probably Berlin or Munich. But you here in Italy, you also have to do the same thing. Create an AI campus, and it will cost a few billions, but you will get many, many billions back, because that's the future of industry. And this is a much larger part of the world economy than the little bit of marketing which is currently dominating the AI profits. It's going to be at least 15%, probably much more. Every part of our civilization is going to be affected by that. Smart robots. This is what OpenAI really recently did with our LSTM to control smart robots. I don't have time to explain that. One of the companies co-founded by my students, DeepMind, my students in Switzerland, they were sold in 2014 for 10 million per person. They had 60 persons by then, and Google said, scrap your business plan, we just pay 10 million per person for the talent. And now they are about 600, I think 800 persons or something. So it seemed expensive at that time, but it was a really good investment for Google, and this company became famous because they built the world's best Go player. So the future is about investing in AI. The big companies do that, but also the big governments do that. America through the Pentagon, China through other types of industrial policy, and you probably can learn something from that. I would like to point out that we not only have machines that slavishly imitate what humans are doing. No, we also have machines that learn like little babies to create their own experiments and to figure out how the world works, how physics world works, and then to become more general problem solvers in the process. So they invent their own goals, their own experiments to figure out what happens if I do that and that, to learn to predict what happens if I do that and that. And that's how babies learn about physics and how other social beings in their environment are predictable to a certain extent. And they use that knowledge to become better problem solvers, and they learn one new thing on top of the old thing. And this is what we also can do. It's not true that computers and artificial neural networks can learn only what some supervising teacher tells them. No, they can learn stuff like babies just by unsupervised active learning, experimenting and figuring out how everything functions, and then use that knowledge to solve all kinds of problems. We have a company that is trying to make general AI a reality. Build systems that learn one new profession after another. Once it knows 100 things, it learns a 101st thing more quickly based on what it already can do. It's called nascence, pronounced like birth in English, nascence, but spelled in a different way. NN for neural networks, AI for artificial intelligence. And it's really about connecting these two disconnected worlds, traditional AI and machines. And these want to marry, and that's going to be the next big wave of AI. And again, no place is more predestined to become central for that than Central Europe, where all these machines are already made and where you have lots of world-leading makers of robots and machines. Here a little self-driving Audi model thing that we had with Audi. So nascence constructed the brains of little cars that learned like babies without a teacher, just by bumping against obstacles and feeling pain, but then trying to minimize pain, learn to park. Or a recent competition where our system learned to control a running skeleton by controlling muscles. In the beginning, it knows nothing about how to run. And maybe you know that a kid, a little baby, needs a year to learn how to control its muscles and how to get up and then run. It takes a year at least. And for our system, it also took many weeks of computation time on really fast computers to learn just through trial and error without a teacher to do that better than any of the competitors. So there were 400 competitors from industry and academia. This is becoming possible now, and it's going to scale, and everything is going to change. Do I still have time to look ahead a little bit into the future? What's going to happen once we have really smart machines that aren't really machines any longer, once they are going to be smarter than humans? Do I still have time for that, or should I close down? I still have a little bit of time. So in the not-so-distant future, for the first time, we are going to have little animal-like AI. We don't have that yet. At the moment, no robot can compare to a little monkey or a little crow which can learn to use tools. But we already see how we are going to get there. And once we have little monkey-level AI, the next step towards human-level AI will be short. Why that? Well, look at biological evolution. It took 3.5 billion years of biological evolution to go from 0 to a little monkey. And then it took just a few tens of millions of years to go from a little monkey to human-level intelligence. Technological evolution is much faster than biological evolution. It's about 1 million times faster because the dead ends are weeded out much faster. So it's we are talking about a few decades. Today, a large, long, short-term memory, as is used for translation from one language to another, has maybe 1 billion connections. Your brain has 1 million times as much, 1 million billion connections. But remember, every 5 years we are getting a factor of 10, which means in 30 years we have that. What's missing? We have a factor of 1 million. And that means that in 30 years we will have little computational devices which have more connections than a human brain, and these will be much faster connections. They will be electronic connections, not these slow connections here. And everything is going to change. And even long before that, we will get lots of superhuman performance in many, many different professions, also in professions that are relevant for this part of the world, for Piedmont. What is going to happen once machines are truly smarter than humans? And I have no doubt, have no doubt that they will become much smarter than we are. That's what my life is about, to build something like that. Since teenager times, I wanted to do that, and we have been getting much closer to that. Let's try to look back. Where is the position of humankind in the grand scheme of things? The Big Bang started everything 13.8 billion years ago. Now we divide that time interval by 1,000. We come out 13.5 million years ago. Something really important happened then, 13.5 million years ago. The first hominids emerged, our ancestors. Now we take this very short time interval of 13.5 million years and divide again by 1,000, and we come out 13,000 years ago. And something really important happened 13,000 years ago. Civilization was invented, agriculture was invented, domestication of the animals. And now you see all of civilization history is just 1/1,000,000th of world history. And of course, it's not over yet. And it's just like a flash in world history, all of civilization. And the first guy who had agriculture was almost the same guy who had spacecraft in 1957. And now, very soon, for the first time, we will have true AI, which really deserves the name. And then what's going to happen? Maybe it will take maybe we will have to take again the last time interval of 13,000 years, divide again by a factor of 1,000, and we come out with 13 years. And maybe only 13 years will be necessary again to transform everything beyond recognition. What are super smart AIs going to do? Of course, they are going to realize, like human scientists, what we have realized a long time ago, which is that almost all resources, physical resources, are not in our little biosphere. They are further out. In the rest of the solar system, there is 2 billion times more solar energy than the little bit that hits the planet Earth. And there's enormous material, a lot of material to build all the infrastructure that you need for a working AI civilization with robots and robot factories and self-replicating robot factories. And what you will have is an expanding sphere of AIs and robots because most of the resources are out there. So those AIs that want to expand, they will be the ones that will be most at some point, just like in standard evolution. And they are going to tap this currently untapped source of energy and matter out there. And soon, almost all of intelligence is going to be far away from the biosphere. I can't see any alternative to that scenario. And it's not going to stop within the solar system because most of the resources are further out. The galaxy has hundreds of billions of stars. Now, all of that sounds like science fiction, but totally within the limits of physics, and very differently from the science fiction stories of the previous century. An AI sphere is going to expand slowly, not faster than light speed, and it's going to cover, in the not so distant future, in a few million years, it's going to cover the entire Milky Way with senders and receivers, such that AIs can travel the way they are traveling in my lab. How do they travel in my lab? But they travel by radio, from sender to receiver. That's how you travel when you're an AI. And the establishment of all this infrastructure will take some time, but just a few millions of years, which is nothing compared to the age of the universe. And it will be not only one AI that is going to dominate everything. No, it will be millions and billions and trillions of different types of AIs, constantly building new types of AIs, new types of robots, some of them vanishing again, a complex AI ecology that is going to expand, and the details are completely unpredictable, except the one thing, that it's going to expand. And now recall that the universe is still young. It's only 13.8 billion years old. It's going to be 1,000 times older than that. Let's look ahead to a time when it's going to be 1,000 times older than now. They will look back and they will say, look, almost immediately after the Big Bang, only 13.8 billion years, 14 billion years later, the entire cosmos started to become intelligent. And since then, the main driving force is not so much physics and gravity, but it's the shaping force of intelligence. Of course, humans won't be able to follow there. Space is not made for humans, like in the old science fiction movies of the previous century, which were really human-centric and unrealistic in many ways. So humans are not going to stay the crown of creation, but that's okay, because you can still see beauty and grandeur in realizing that we are part of a grander scheme that's leading the entire cosmos from less complexity towards higher complexity. It's a privilege to live at a time where we can witness the beginnings of that incredible development and where we can participate in shaping it. Thank you for your patience.